I think that there are so many kinds of producers, though. I, more like Bill, started as a I started actually as an executive and then actually began as marketing and distribution with this marvelous team that just walked in, and then moved into acquisitions and then producing. And producing for me was finding material and or a storyteller who I fell in love with, and wanting to tell that particular story. The other thing that really, for me, drove my passion is that so my mother's Creole from Louisiana, Black Creole. My father's, just by his description, light-skinned Black guy from California. But what occurred to me growing up is the stories that kept getting made about the African-American experience in America were limited is not quite the word, and yet that didn't mirror any of the spectrum of my family's experience of being here for 400 years and being Black. And I wanted to really give a way to tell a variety of stories. And, and you go on that journey and you encounter other kinds of producers. There are the producers who bring some money, producers who bring all money, producers who are connected to cast or directors or sometimes writers these days. And, there are line producers and production managers who are amazing and then move up to getting a producer credit. I don't want to embarrass her, but one of the best post-production people I have ever worked with, Robin Elaine Feldman, who's here. She gets a producing credit because without the genius that she manages to get through in post, it keeps us all on schedule, who saved my bum on one particular occasion. They also become producers. So in some ways, sometimes you see these movies, TV shows too, but that's a little different because of the Writers Guild and the structure of television. You might see 20 producers. Well, each one may have one piece that they brought that was invaluable. And then there will be some that are executive and some that are the people who are there from first thing in the morning when the trucks come till the project is well aired and done and finished. So
I find something you said really interesting. So having started as an executive, what made you want to become a producer and not stay on the executive side of things?
Right. So also I'm old. And when I started in the business, it was a lot of guys. And I worked at this company, and I don't want to embarrass anyone, but they got hold of what I thought was a quintessential book about the female experience. And they talked to, and I was at that point the senior woman there, uninterested in whatever I had to say. Hired a guy to do it and write it, who I don't think liked women very much. And it was a disaster. And once they looked at the final version and it was a disaster, they were like, Shelby, come give notes. And I thought, well, you can imagine the unpleasant things I thought. And that really made me just go, you know what? This is ridiculous. Like it's beyond ridiculous, but in that time and place, none of them understood the irony of the mess that they had created. And that really made me think, you know what, as soon as I can figure out how to navigate, thanks to Spike Lee, I did make that leap. I just couldn't. It was like a nightmare to sit through.
So you leave, and then you're like, there's day one of like, I'm now a producer, and you don't have the steady income of being an executive anymore. So what are you doing at like that first day or week or month to now assert yourself as a producer and get people to shift their perception of you and their understanding of what your capabilities are?
Well, I kind of did what I always do. My parents were very big on education, so we were all bookworms. We weren't raised watching TV. We went to movies once a week, and we read. So I just did a lot of reading. But truthfully, I have to say that I got a phone call from Spike, who knew me from New York, an independent film, and he said, I have this movie, it's set up, I think you should produce it. And I said, okay. And again, it was a lot of guys. Not, Spike is awesome, but there was a lot of guys. And as a woman, you know, you have to navigate. I'm not making a blanket statement. I'm married to a guy, I love him. I like guys. But you know, as a woman, when you are supposed to be the boss or the co-boss, a bunch of guys, especially the Teamster guys, some of them, and there was a famous Teamster guy who had no fingers on one hand, who drove down from New York. So you have to like find a way, because we're labeled really quickly, right? You're judged and labeled for what you look like. You're judged and labeled, they think that you're mean or the B word, and all of that can happen really easily. And sometimes you just have to let it go because you have no control over that. So, you know, it's a bit of quickly understanding all the equipment, all the lights, what everybody does. And, you know, some people don't take that approach, but I do. I wanted to know, what does everyone do and what does it mean? Because I'd been an executive all those years. And I did that by going and hanging out on all the trucks.
Mm-hmm. I think Shelby speaks to something that's very important, because a lot of us think about, you know, what is someone's IQ, their intelligence quotient, or their EQ, their emotional quotient, but there should be something called AQ, which is your adaptability quotient, which is something I look for in partnering with people, because you know, producers have to constantly be adaptable to the needs of their project. And I think, you know, what Bill was saying and Shelby was saying is like that. Basically, a producer's job, we are responsible for the overall integrity of whatever it is we're doing, and that means both the creative and financial integrity of it. But that means being very, very nimble, because we're managing hundreds of people who are helping to try to identify that and bolster that vision that you're all following. Needs to duck and weave pretty.
Well, my first day as a producer, I had a really good Chicago. But you know, it was fantastic. And started. So I don't know how I had this felt accepted movies. I had a job. the cameras are rolling. But it was a blessing in disguise because $35. So tips. But that really became also out of that. But like Shelby, I think ultimately using executive Godfather. So it was such a wide spectrum of creative people, and kind of get a little bit of a sense of, not that there was a lot of rational kind of structured thought from the top of the studio down, but how they saw the market and the audience and what they were looking for and how they were approaching marketing these movies, and that was really my grad school.
But I think it touches on something that I find to be really interesting, and it is like us all having been at studios when there was still a time when you could identify what studio it was because they had a brand, right? Mm-hmm. You could identify. I was at Miramax in its heyday, right? Like Miramax, all you needed to do was see that like twinkly Miramax logo come up, and it didn't really matter what the movie was. You felt like someone cared about there was like artistic integrity to it. Paramount was the same. All the studios were at some point. Now it feels like we exist in this world where you have these sort of just undifferentiated big box stores of studios and streamers. So now when you are looking for material, how do you try to identify material that you, and especially since the streamers don't give us any feedback on what is or is not working, how do you try to identify material, and how do you think about, how do I get this into the marketplace, and how do I get it to its audience, and how do you decide which studio or streamer might be right, or versus, Bill, you're now doing a lot of independent financing, versus just being like, fuck them, I'm just going to finance this independently because they're not going to be able to help me the way I know that a really good executive can. So I'm very curious to hear how you guys are going to be approaching the next year, 2, 5, 10.
I guess I would say for me, and I think for better or worse, because I admire many people who have a skill that I feel I don't have. I always felt like I had to be part of the audience for what I was endeavoring to make, and that I had to trust somehow that I wasn't such an extreme outlier, that the things that spoke to me and moved me or made me scared or laugh or moved in tears would also touch other people, so that, especially as a producer, you kind of have to have a compass, and you're managing a big team of people and you're, partnering shoulder to shoulder with a filmmaker, trying to get inside their head and understand their vision and how they see the story they're trying to tell. But you have to have some connection to it yourself. And, often this can be a many yeared journey. So I'd also say the kind of bar of yes is a pretty high bar, because you say yes and you can find yourself 10 years later, waking up and, dialing for dollars and trying to push that rock up the hill, So it's kind of having a connection to it, but a very strong connection to it. And, just feeling like convinced, this is great, I'm right. There's a huge audience for this. And sometimes, the marketplace will refute your opinion without losing a lot of sleep over it, and sometimes it will validate your opinion. But at least for me, I think I can't work from what are they looking for, I'm going to supply what they're looking for, because I think the audience doesn't really know what they're looking for. They like something that's fresh, and an artist who's telling them a story in a way that feels authentic and told with conviction, So that's why right now, the kind of tyranny of the algorithms, it's a tricky place to be, as an independent producer, no doubt.
I would, in my head, and my producing partner and I, there's the studios, right? And what the studios, it's really rare that it isn't superhero IP based off of something that's usually a lot of blowing up and costumes, which is great. I have nothing against them. What was heartening to me on the studio side is that Oppenheimer did as well as it did, because it's actually an adult movie. I don't think the studios necessarily is not what I think of that's what they do anymore, and that was lovely. I'm so glad it made as much money as it did. Maybe it'll help change things. As far as the streamers, and because I also work in television, the streamers are sort of one half is film and the other half is TV. I'm with Bill, like, I have to actually love it, because I did a movie called Bessie, and I was very lucky to work with Dick and Lily Zanuck, and that took 22 years. And I joined them about 10 years into the journey, but it took a long time to kind of land on the right piece. And also, I think everybody in town, you went through that with Queen's Gambit. Everybody at town at some point had it. And for whatever reason, things coalesce. And sometimes the buyers and the market have to catch up with you, right? Sometimes you hit like with Lackawanna Blues or with The Shy, like you hit a kind of zeitgeist that just connects when you're trying to do it. But without loving it, for me, I have to go into it understanding, I think Lackawanna took 13 months from the day we sold it to Colin and Carrie in the room to when it aired. That's the fastest I've ever had. Sometimes it'll take, it could take 22 years, it could take 10 years, whatever. It's not a business model, but it's certainly a reason for you to keep pushing. And I think that some of being a producer is understanding, like, when you keep pushing. Sometimes you have to put something in a drawer for a while till it gets fresh again, or you can look at it from a fresh perspective. But I think every day, and right now, the business is imploding, not unlike what happened to the music business after Spotify. So it's like every day I have a lot of phone calls finding out, like, who is left standing, what is it they think they might want to do, and whether or not I think that there's a way of any of the things that we've got that we can maneuver in.
Yeah. it can be pretty disconcerting. I've made now 3 movies for Netflix, and I had this stable of executives that I would work with, and then it was like last March, I think. In one day, 9 of the 10 of them were just gone. And then you're like, okay, well, this is a place I thought I had a very good relationship, and now I don't know anybody anymore. So figuring out how to, again, I think it goes back to this sort of adaptability thing. One thing that is, it can take years to make these movies. There's a writer here named Austin Bunn who's trying to sneak out, but he and I made a movie together called Kill Your Darlings that took, 10 years. And I made the mistake of amortizing my salary once we finally made it over the 10 years. And I was like, this is crazy. So don't do that. That's what someone who has.
Don't think about amortizing.
But I agree with that. It's,
Horberg's law. This is what the market will pay. This is your budget. If you subtract the producer fees, you'll get your film financed. I mean, there's now a moment to the penny, It's like, okay, we can pay you exactly the amount of money that if you defer all your fees.
Right. And then you get into these sort of crazy-making conversations where I'm developing a project now, and the company we're working with says, well, we'll pay the writer to write the treatment, and we'll pay the director to work with the writer to develop in the treatment, and we know you'll be working on the treatment with them because you found the story, but we're not going to pay you.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay, well, thanks.
Yeah, I wouldn't go into producing for the money. I'm just, saying, when I announced many years back, my father was still alive, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but if there's a kind of old black dad I happen to have, a lot of my friends had, they're very plain speaking. When I told him I was going to be a producer, he said, are you kidding me? That's for rich white girls with trust funds. No, you can't do that. I'm not paying for that. I'm not helping. And you know what? He wasn't wrong, because when you get started in this and you realize, oh, there's a tiny bit of money. I did a movie with a director friend of mine, and the first thing they wanted to cut, there were 2 producers, cut both of our fees in half. They were like, oh, we can close the budget that way. And you know what? You are faced with this impossible choice all the time, as Bill said. So you have to do it for love, because the money may or may not come. That can't be the motivation.
Right, and without the producers having we have the Producers Guild, which we are all part of and working to try to create parameters and scaffolding to protect ourselves. But unfortunately, because we don't have a certified labor union behind us,
Right.
We often are the ones who
Yeah, to be clear, the Writers Guild is a union, the Directors Guild is a union, the Producers Guild is not. It's really a trade organization. The National Labor Relations Board, at a different era in time, kind of said producers are management, so they can't also wear the hat of labor. That really doesn't ring true anymore. In the streaming world, the economic model of the last 10 or 12 years has converted almost all production into work for hire. And the producers right now find themselves employees without benefits. And we're employing everybody else who enjoy the benefits that their union collectively bargains for. And, we were out on the lines with the writers, out on the lines with the actors. We certainly supported their actions against the AMPTP. We ourselves were not able to, picket or strike or do anything like that. So it is a crisis. It's kind of a generational crisis in some ways. There was such an extreme explosion of production in the last 10 years. It's been unprecedented. That gave rise to a tremendous amount of employment and a huge need for training and job skills, but it also kind of lifted a lot of people very quickly into positions of responsibility for which they had not, been trained. And, one of the biggest issues that the Producers Guild is engaged in is safety. In every meaning of that word, both physical safety, but emotional safety, anti-sexual harassment policies. But, we've seen tragedies in our industry recently, and it's not coincidental to the fact that there's just been such a extreme amount of content being produced. And I think the quality suffers. There aren't enough great stories. There aren't enough people who are, skilled to be those storytellers. It's been great in terms of trying to break down certain barriers and to redefine who are the storytellers and what voices tell stories and what they look like and sound like and all of that. But I think the producing part of it has been squeezed more than almost any other position in the structure of making commercial films.
So what do you think we can do as more established producers to help, I don't know if train is the right word, but to help bolster younger producers? Because I certainly remember those days, after I produced my first movie, it was like, okay, well now how do I get this next one going? And the first movie I made, it was like $1.5 million. That $20,000 fee I made on it lasted,
3 years.
Yeah. But I agree. I think there's a lot of people have been able to move up very quickly, which in one sense is wonderful because it creates opportunity. But in the other sense, a lot of people don't have the skill set that we have, which just comes from years of experience. But I feel a sense of responsibility for people in our job category, and I want to help people succeed. So what do you think how can we help the generation that's coming up?
Well, first, and this is not a plug, but I think that the work we all do with the Producers Guild is really invaluable because we are a place where new producers and producers who are with a lot of experience can have meaningful dialogue and connection, and you mentor people through the Producers Guild. I mentor lots of people through Women in Film, through the Producers Guild, through Film Independent, etc. Because I think it's mentorship, it's building relationships, we always, our current assistant who's been with us, who started an agency, and she's Haitian American, and she has her own idea of what she'd like to do as a producer. But she's on the calls. We did a African American series, I don't know, 2 summers ago, and of course the studio wouldn't bring her to set, but we brought her to set and she stayed. So she was there from the beginning of prep all the way through wrap, so she could be on the ground and see for herself. And I said, you got to go to all the trucks. You got to go to all the trucks. You got to find out what everybody does, what all the equipment is. And I think that's about all you can do, because we're not a union, right. So you can't work up. You just make something enough that you can guarantee yourself to get into the Producers Guild, and then it's about all of the networking and the connecting with people and asking questions.
In many ways, it seems like it's still a very sort of almost apprentice-based sort of job.
I think so.
So for anybody out there who's looking to do it, go talk to Bill and Shelby after this.
What about you?
Bill, what do you think?
Well, there is a big group of people who are trying to now organize a producers union. It really remains to be seen whether it would reach a tipping point where it could have enough leverage to force the studios to the bargaining table. And I think, I'm a little bit cynical, but, the studios, like any, capitalist enterprise, they're only going to be forced by, threat of strike to negotiate. And unless they're like big suppliers of, mostly television, the Dick Wolfs and the Shonda Rhimes and the Ryan Murphys are gonna walk the line for independent producers like Shelby and I just don't know that we'll ever gain that kind of leverage to force, minimum wages and working hours and healthcare benefits. Producers have no healthcare.
Correct.
I'm making a movie for a billion-dollar corporation like Netflix, and I'm their employee, and I have no healthcare. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of awareness of it. There's certainly a lot of things happening, dynamic things happening. I was just sent this morning a kind of draft of a producer's Bill of Rights that we're trying to codify and kind of get to a place where we can ally with the Directors Guild and the Screen Actors Guild and see if those alliances can kind of help us, just get some minimum basic, guarantees of working conditions. So it's the topic du jour, I would say, for everybody, and you get to a point where you want to give back and you want to see this thing that has been your craft and that you love and see it handed over to another generation and believe that it could be a path, for, a young person to take and to, kind of carry on. Because I just see, from 40 years of doing this, just the centrality of a producer, what a huge difference it makes, having been on the studio side, making movies with inexperienced producers, having been a producer myself, having been a producer financier, trying to partner with other producers. And it's hard to quantify how in almost every part of the process, the filmmaking and the filmmaker benefits if they have that, person who can sit at 30,000 feet, because the film, it's really a cliche, but, you're making a huge mosaic tile, tile by tile, and you have to be so in the weeds, and you need somebody who can see literally the big picture.
Right. So with this Bill of Rights, right, which will lay out who we are, what we do, what we stand for, we're the hub of. What do you think then is the best way to articulate that and get people to align with us? Because I think one of the things I struggle with is I'm a member of the Producers Guild and helping draft this thing. I think it's wonderful that we're doing this because it helps just sort of clarify the vision. But then the next step is, then what do we how do we get this? There's only so many of these panels we can do in one day to help advocate for ourselves. So how do you think we can identify for the industry a little bit more clearly the importance of a producer, and how do you think we could potentially align with any of the other unions out there?
I think the unions are open to alignment. I think Bill correctly called it, which is that it's about the studios, and to in a different way the networks and particularly the streamers who do both things. And that I do think, Bill, you were right. You need the huge TV, because a lot of them, like Berlanti and Ryan Murphy, do both things.
Right.
But you also need the Bruckheimers, the big producers who do the billion-dollar franchise movies to agree to go on strike. And I guess I'm super cynical. I mean, I have a friend who was really involved. She's really involved in trying to get the producers union going, but no story I hear from that it sounds promising.
And can one of you identify the difference between the Producers Guild and the Producers Union?
Well, the Producers Guild has been around for 40 or 50 years. It has 9,000 members. It's a broad coalition from television and film and new media. The union is only, a year old or something, and it's mostly comprised of Producer Guild members who are just trying to see if they can reconstitute legally and kind of find a path to get chartered as a actual union. But there's a big cultural problem in Hollywood too, because if you think about it, if you're a writer, you get credited as a writer. If you're a director, you got credit as a director. You're an actor, you're playing this role. The producing job is the only one where the credit kind of got detached from the job and it became a form of compensation. And you can kind of understand why, and certainly as an independent producer, I've been guilty of it, but you need to raise financing. And in order to do that, the people who are writing the check tend to dictate what credit they want on the movie. And then if you need the money badly enough, you're going to make that concession. So, you see these movies, as you said, Jared, with 17, 20 names on it, 25 executive producers. And, there aren't 30 people in every meeting standing on set talking about the process of making this movie. They're just people who might have gone to high school with the movie star, and get that star to star in your movie, you had to give that person a credit on your movie. I had a guy finance my movie and he demanded a kind of credit to be named later. He just said, I'm taking a credit and I need another credit. I was like, what? And it was his 19-year-old son, when we finished the movie. I never met the guy. He had nothing to do with the making of the movie. He came to the premiere as the producer of the movie. It was pretty hard to take after I spent 10 years making this movie, So it's a cultural thing in the agency world, in the lawyer world. I can't tell you how many times I'm on the other side of, this guy needs this credit. I go, well, he's not doing the job. Why does he need that credit? But it's also, Hollywood is nothing if not an orgy of ego. And, unfortunately, the credit also is attached to accolades, right? So, in order to win an Oscar, you have to have a producer credit on a film. The executive producer cannot win the Oscar for Best Picture. So that's also something we've been fighting. I'm on the executive board of the Academy, is trying to say, is there a way to actually give a statute to an executive producer, which would then motivate people to see that credit as a valuable credit and to want that and maybe more appropriately take that, at least in film. And in television, the executive producer is the more desirable credit.
It'll be interesting as we move forward, because obviously we are needed by the studios and the streamers because we become the hub. But I even experienced around 15 years ago, I had made a movie where in post there was this new producer name, and we were all thought, who is this woman who's now producing the movie? And it turns out that the financier and his partner were in the process of breaking up, and one financier had already given a credit to someone, and we had approved that as part of the financing deal. And in this sort of pissing contest with each other, this other financier decided, well, if my ex-partner's so-and-so is going to get the credit, I'm going to give this person a credit. And it turns out that was for his granddaughter, who was in 7th grade. And we actually, if I remember correctly, the PGA had to get involved and arbitrate, and ultimately decided that sort of in a cheeky way, that a 7th grader with a full load of homework daily does not also have time to go and produce a movie.
But that's the great thing about the mark.
Yeah.
Because that is one of the things I was very happy about, even though sometimes you see that slides, but, they try to award the mark, or you can challenge it if it's just someone's manager who never came to set, but because they're attached to the star or whatever, the writer, they get this credit. And, it's not a perfect system, but at least it is trying to help define who should get an award and who actually did what on set. Mm-hmm. But it's tough. I mean, and
But beyond all of this, I'd say the other secret of producing is you probably would do it if they didn't pay you. There's some part of it where it's almost a calling as much it is it's not a 9-to-5 job. You got to be obsessed, really, to go to the lengths that you need to go to will any of these projects into existence, and like your Bessie story, Queen's Gambit, took 30 years, really, because the guy who optioned the book originally optioned it in the early 90s. And every studio turned it down and laughed at it, really. 1950s orphanage, chess, young girl, are you out of your mind, And then even when we made it, everybody recognized its quality, but nobody, myself included to Ted Sarandos, certainly thought it was going to go out and become, the most watched television series at that time in Netflix history. It was inconceivable, or else I would have gotten the merchandising rights for the Queen's Gambit chess set that you can buy in the lobby.
But that ultimately is the real reward, right? Like when you tell a story or part of the storytelling process, and that feedback of like you've offered some light to someone. It's hard out there in the world, and you're hearing us bemoan. It's hard up here, but offering 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 2 hours for people to just escape and have their imagination light up or be moved in some way. For me, it was 10 years ago or so. I made a movie called The Skeleton Twins with Kristen Wiig and Bill Hader, and thank you to that one person. And the director and I were at the Nantucket Film Festival. And the movie is about Kristen and Bill play estranged siblings who reunite, and it's playful and poignant. But we showed the movie, and then afterward, we did this Q&A. And afterward, this woman comes up to me and grabs me very firmly on my bicep, and with tears in her eyes, and says, "Thank you so much for making this movie. I enjoyed it. I was moved, and I laughed. And as soon as I let go of your arm, I'm going to go call my brother, who I have not spoken to in over 30 years." Right? And it's just like, even now I get a little moved thinking about it. And it's like, there's nothing that beats that for me. It's wonderful to feel that sort of connection with fellow humanity. All right, what else? We have 5 minutes. Anything you guys want to say before we get to the Q&A part? I don't want to give them. We have 5 minutes before we have to get to the Q&A. Where's the Q&A starting? What?
Once you guys are all wrapped up.
Any last thoughts before we get to the Q&A?
I really just want to say I have 2 movies screening this weekend, so I hope you guys can go and see them. They're so different. Today at 5:15, it's also tomorrow, is this movie The Monk and the Gun from Bhutan. This beautiful filmmaker Pawo Dorji, whose first film, Lunana, A Yak in the Classroom. If you haven't seen it, one of my favorite movies of the last couple of years, and just was a sleeper that got nominated for an Oscar a couple of years ago, the first film from Bhutan ever to do so. And this is his follow-up film, and I think it's equally unique and beautiful, and it offers a lot to think about. It's a Bhutanese perspective, a country that values gross national happiness over gross national product. And then on Sunday afternoon, there's going to be the U.S. premiere of this film, Ezra, Robin Feldman. Yeah, very close to my heart. This is a script from a man named Tony Spiridakis. His beautiful son, Dimitri, graduated from Bard a year ago. He is a neurodivergent young man, and Tony wrote a really honest, authentic script of his own experience as a parent raising a child with autism. The movie stars a 12-year-old boy we found in Montclair, William Fitzgerald, who himself is on the autism spectrum, and to say he steals the movie from Robert De Niro gives you a little sense of what you're in for.
Great. Should we start the Q&A time?
Oh, thank you. So on the whole agenda of producers receiving appropriate compensation, health care, safety, etc., the whole agenda that you all hit on, do you think there's a reasonable window to crack open before you spend the time you're going to spend and should spend with the guilds and the unions and the bylaws and all the stuff that needs to be articulated to just start instituting a kind of common practice and saying to Netflix and Amazon and Paramount and whomever, you list them, part of this deal has to include, healthcare. Pick one, any one of the mandated things, so that it starts to become part of the conversation, and it becomes more and more like, well, they pay and they don't, and if you want to be competitive for this caliber of executive producer, carrier of good material, etc., responsible party, to the Anthony Bregmans and the Bill Horbergs and the Shelbys and the Jareds and all of you who are integral in being reliable producers and deliverers, that it might make some sense to start. That's my first question. And then I have another question.
I think it is possible. So I'm sure I'm not allowed to say this because I'm sure it was like some non-precedental thing I signed. But I just made a movie for Searchlight, and I got them to include paying for my health care for an entire year, which felt like a pretty major breakthrough.
That's a major win. And if you all did that as part of your precedent condition contract negotiations, it would probably maybe start to take hold. Or not. I don't know.
I could already feel
You're
Disney.
a good agent, so if there's two people who want something, you've got the leverage to do that.
Well,
if you only have one, or you're in a kind of independent world with
I
financing.
throw a dinner party too, so there's that. But so I have another question, which is a little bit off the track, but in this exact moment that we're living in, where there is such a spotlight on equitability and the huge separation of who makes a lot and who makes a little, and how many people are like adding up their wages and saying, well, for that movie I made $3.50 an hour for half the time I worked on it. And you look at things like the cost of a film, like a series, for example, like The Bear, which is highly regarded, but because of the way the whole thing was structured, costs between $7 and $9 million an episode for less than 42 minutes. Maybe things are going to shift back to the one-off model, and they're going to start paying for more single entity films and fewer series, or series are going to cost less because they're not going to be able to afford it. I mean, what do you think about all that?
Well, I don't think that's true.
That's fine. You can.
I think that there was a period of time years ago, and it was a fight that happened every year, where HBO made a lot of movies. I was lucky; I made a lot of movies during that period. But the struggle between series and movies never ended, and series won. And I think if you look at at, there's the big budget, big star load movies. Then there's like everything else, which varies in price point, but is over here. And, series, it's easier to amortize, and they have a different risk assessment. I'm sure these guys might disagree. But first of all, we have to see where the dust settles in the implosion that is at hand and isn't done yet. Because also it's what is drawing the most eyeballs and how do they amortize it? We work, yes, it's creative, but we work in as Bill said, a capitalist system. And it's not going the other direction. It's not becoming less capitalist. It's quite the opposite.
I wouldn't expect, but it would be interesting to see. I just think, I suspect, and I have no real proof, that a lot of these companies are skating on a sea of red ink, just like all the people with their credit cards that can't pay their bills when all of a sudden there's no paychecks at the end of the week. So $9 million for a 30 or 40-minute episode of something seems very, very expensive, and it seems like they might be able to move the money around in a different way.
But if it over-indexes, sorry.
Yeah.
That's that's the measure, right?
Don't pick on the bear.
I know.
I love the bear.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, you want to talk about Andor? They spent $300 million to make 12 episodes of. So
Exactly.
yes, sir.
I have a friend of mine, he's from Cameroon, Africa. He's a filmmaker, and he's a writer, and he's a singer, and he's got a band. And he just got graduated from dishwashing to a pot cleaner. That's for real. The problem you guys are talking about is not producers or writers. The problem is the system itself. It's not the political system. It's the economic system worldwide. I wouldn't say this unless I had sort of an answer, but I'm not going to go into that. The problem, I believe your mission, and I didn't know what a producer was, by the way, anyway. I didn't know whether you needed a writer, a screenplay writer. I didn't know. But if you tell me you picked it up from soup to nuts, that's great. The reality is if you don't change the world economic system, not just the U.S. economic system, we're sitting here fat and wealthy, most people in this room. I know an awful lot of people, I'm sure you do too, who are really suffering. They don't have the money to go to park a car, let alone come to one of these places. So,
Do you have a question?
I would like to know how, if you had the opportunity to write, to do a movie or do a play or do a short or a commercial, would you guys be interested in trying to change the economic system? And could you do that without support?
Yeah, I guess I'm a believer in the Trojan horse, that you want a vehicle and a form that is accessible, that is entertaining, that is emotional, and that's going to bring people to whatever story you're telling. And then within that story, you can populate it with ideas, and I think the most interesting commercial films to me are ones where the filmmakers are kind of very aware of the genre they're playing in, the tropes that that genre brings with it, but find ways to subvert it, finds ways to bring an audience to meaning and to experience that makes them leave the theater talking to each other and debating and so whether that's around economic issues or around issues of the human heart or around microculture in Africa and Cameroon, I'm kind of agnostic in terms of that, but I certainly celebrate artists who try to push the boundaries.
I have a question. You said, Shelby, now that the dust is settled. So I'm curious with the three of you, whoever wants to ask, you've been idling, not idle, but idling, and now you can move forward. What's next for
Idling.
you? Idling, not idling, like waiting, you know.
There's not,
Treading water.
The engine's running, but you can't go. So now that you can go, where?
Do you mean where, like what projects were each? Oh, okay.
What you gonna do next?
Well, there are things that we were able to do. Documentaries, animation, those things sort of exist outside of the Writers Guild and
also
SAG.
internationally.
You can work internationally. For me, I was able to focus on some documentary stuff. I use this as an opportunity to move into animation, but also I only have so much bandwidth, right? And my company is small, so for us, we just use it as an opportunity to just read prolifically and just try to find all those stories, those next stories that we want to tell that we hope will come out in sometime between the next 10 and 30 years.
So I kind of did the same. We are doing Amir Questlove's new doc, which is on Sly Stone,
So cool.
which is just mind-blowing, awesome. That'll be next year. And, you know, the second half of season 6 of The Chi can start shooting. Shot a lot. The SAG strike ends soon. And, you know, the rest of it was just reading. Like, I found a couple book series and some older English television that I want to do American remakes of. So that's kind of what.
Well, we had actually shot 3 movies last fall, so we were in post-production, you know, when the strike hit, and really involved in finishing those films, and all 3 of them were happily invited to premiere at Toronto Film Festival. 2 of them are playing here. So that's been kind of our cycle, and yeah, super happy that the writers stood their ground for 148 days and seemed to have made a historic, deal that was, really hard fought and hard won. We have a couple feature films that we're hoping to make in the first quarter of next year. One with a Chinese director down in Taiwan. One maybe right here in New York State. And then, like Jared, we are also making documentaries, so those projects have been, ongoing, kind of in spite of the labor strike. We're doing a film with this wonderful Haitian director, Raoul Peck, is going to make a documentary about George Orwell that I think is very exciting and timely. And Alex Gibney, who's a big game hunter, has set his sights on Elon Musk, and
Oh, good.
he's making
great.
a documentary for HBO, kind of looking at all 6 sides of that character.
I'd like to go back to what you were saying, though, for a second, because I do think there's 2 conversations around an economic model, right? There's the larger societal thing, which, I don't know, it seems like short of a coup is like, that's not going to change. But I think within our industry, if the question is there an opportunity for a different economic model in terms of sort of like the development through distribution process where the creatives can participate more, yes, I think that like there is an opportunity outside that there is an opportunity there to, because as Shelby has said multiple times, like the industry is in many ways collapsing, and there's no correlation between, well, just for the streamers, there's 0 correlation between the number of subscribers it has and the number of views something has, right? So there's so much tension and frustration there, and even with these landmark deals that are happening with the WGA and will likely happen with, right, this still doesn't reestablish trust, and so I do think that yes, there is, and you said you have many wealthy friends. If they want to come talk to me, I'm happy to start to figure out a new way forward.
Refer to George Orwell and to connect a little bit with what you're saying too.
We want 2084, not 1984.
Right.
So I'm a little nervous because I'm a complete novice, and I have a very passionate vision for a documentary that I'm now thinking I want to start with a film that's more character-driven, focusing on some of the leaders of this subculture of women. And I, as the creative, as the visionary, I'm not sure where to place myself so that I both have control as it unfolds, to stay aligned with my vision, and so that I also get paid. And so my idea of a producer was that magical person or persons that would network and find the funds and the support financially, and some of the talent to make it happen. And that's why I'm here. I'm here to learn, and I appreciate you all. I'd really like to talk to you, Shelby, because I'm a woman, I'm an elder, and I got to know my topic really well, like embodied, like really well. So I feel really prepared. I just don't know. I get really confused when I see the credits now on movies, because sometimes there's 24 producers, and sometimes the producer is also the director is also the, and I just, I'd like to, I can't afford 22 years to make a film. I want it to roll out in 2. I applied for 1 grant. They asked me what the budget was. I had no idea. I said $2 million. I had no idea. But I do have a pretty famous filmmaker who's on my side and who wants to do the film. So he's in LA, so I figure I better be able to pay him, right? But I also want to pay myself. So if you have any comments about that.
I don't know. I feel like I don't think you wanted. I've made some movies that have taken years. That wasn't the intent. It was absent falling into the pile of money. The project's going to take the amount of time the project takes, and either the buyers in the market catch up with you, or it doesn't. And I don't mean to make that sound harsh, but I don't think I have yet to figure out a way to guarantee that what I want is going to actually happen, right? So I think that, if there's a project that you have such a passion about and you want to direct and you've got a direct hand in, that's where we all start from, and you're on a journey. I don't think you can sit in the results, and I don't think you have control over the journey the story takes. And I know that might sound ridiculous, but I don't know another way to say it. I have to, all the time, let it go, because it's going to happen in the time it's going to happen, and I can't make it. I just can't, I don't know. I have yet to figure out how to make it happen in a different time.
Working. Oh, there we go. I've watched over the years. I'm a filmmaker. I made 1 film, but I've watched the films that you've made, smaller films that you've made, and then the bigger films. And we've heard a lot about the pitfalls of being producers. Is there a difference between, or have you having established yourselves as bigger filmmakers and producers, has your salaries changed because of it? Like with Netflix and the Queen's Gambit and Lars and The Real Girl, I mean, there was a difference in the outcome of those films. So were you able to negotiate? I mean, I assume that you were able to negotiate a better salary. Is that correct?
Yes, but I mean, with each project, your quote goes up. But I've made things for $1.5 million. I've made things for $100 million. Obviously, like the bigger things pay better, but again, like you never know what's going to happen next. So you always have to just make sure that you are saving in case, like, whether the next projects fall apart or you happen to get swept away by something that you can only get financed for $1.5 million, or $1 million, or $500,000, and then you have to make sure that you have enough money to be able to afford. You have enough money saved so you can then afford to go follow your passion and tell that story that isn't going to allow you to have the.
I'd like to say one thing because
Sure.
those are two very different examples.
Right.
Lars and the Real Girl is made in a profit model, right? So as a producer or a financier, you own the product, you're putting it out into a distribution marketplace, and you're, monetizing it. And if the film is a wild hit, eventually you will collect the benefit of success. The Queen's Gambit is a work for hire model, as almost all production has been to date for Netflix, for Amazon, for Apple, Disney. So there are no profits. You get paid a fee, and then there's a kind of negotiated buyout where you get a bonus essentially on top of your negotiated fee. But that's one of the biggest tensions right now. It's created a huge misalignment between creative talent and the platforms. And there's no transparency whatsoever in terms of their data. They're very proprietary in terms of viewership. So, as a producer, you're just kind of in the dark and in the blind as to, really, was this a hit? Was it not a hit? How big a hit? How many people saw it? And because you have no benefit from its ultimate success, you're really incentivized to get them to spend as much as possible. So it's created this perverse inflation in budgets. The producers have no motivation to control costs. They have the opposite motivation. I want you to make this for 80 instead of 40. So, every week I see something come out where it's just, your mind is blown. Like, how did you guys spend $60 million with a first-time director to tell this story when I could have made that movie for 10 and sold it to you for 6 and had a better product, So that's one of the things that's just kind of cloud cuckoo land right now.
Well, it sounds like the competition, and also that you just, in the beginning, you have no idea whether the film is going to be successful. So you can't say, oh, this film is going to make X amount of money, so I should get X amount of money.
Nobody's ever known what's going to be successful.
Right, of course. So, I don't know, okay. Thank you.
Hi, thanks very much for this over here. Hi, I am a producer and a music supervisor, and it's very interesting hearing the insight from you on the challenges you face with going through the process of advocating for unionization. It's something that we, with Guild of Music Supervisors, are going down this same path and have hit roadblocks along the way, only kind of more emphasized by the recent strikes, where so many music supervisors have been unemployed during the strike time. My question for you, Bill, is how you were talking about aligning with other unions to try to find companionship there. Have you considered other trade organizations aligning with those, like something like the Guild of Music Supervisors, which is on a very similar path right now?
Well, I would say just specifically no, because I'm no longer in a leadership position at the Producers Guild. I'm kind of emeritus there, but I think it's a good idea to find as many, brethren in the fight as possible. So I would certainly think, the Guild would be open to that.
Just even hearing what you were saying about the Bill of Rights that you have that has been created, it is a very similar path that we're on.
I know
right now.
casting directors joined the Teamsters Union, a couple of years ago. So that's how they found enfranchisement, was really through the vehicle of joining another union.
Right. Yeah. Thank you.
Hi. I'm here. Thank you so much for the lovely panel. I'm a younger creator,
And one of the things I'd like to move out of is producing my own work, which means that I need to hire producers. And that's been the journey I've been on recently. And my question for all three of you on stage is, what is, an anecdotal question, what is your favorite or most unique way that a young creator, a writer or director, has ever made a connection with you?
I think what I find I'm drawn to is clarity, right? If someone is clear on what the story they want to tell is and what their vision is, not necessarily in an obstinate way, in a way that feels collaborative, but just a clarity of like they understand why they want to tell the story, who the story's for, and that, you know, I watch things all the time. I'm an audience member, so when you're telling me about whatever it is you're making, do I lean in and feel a connection to it, right? Is there a humanity to it? Is it going to make me laugh? Is it going to make me cry? So it's really just about making sure you are always very clear about what it is you're doing and why.
Clarity is always good. I'm very big on, no, seriously, learning to communicate is super important, and yet, I have worked with some people who are absolutely brilliant, who can't communicate with you verbally. Maybe you just have to read what they're writing, or you have to find a different way to, like, adaptability, get inside their head. Generally, you know, I don't know, my producing partner who's not here, Derek, and I just, and how I've always done is, you know, I look at short films. Short films are a great way to understand the scope of someone's creativity and their clarity. You know, Charlene Wells, who did After Sun, you know, when she was out looking for financing, which was not a film I was involved in, but a film I loved, but when she had like 4 films on the festival circuit at the same time, you really understood the clarity of her vision. You know, when I found Dee Reese, it was because I loved Pariah, and I loved her short. And we had a meeting, and that's how she ended up on Bessie, is because those were the most articulated vision for an artist that I could, you know, short of reading a script and falling in love with. You saw what she was going to do as a director. You understood the kind of unique and very specific articulation of a creative vision. So to me, I love seeing shorts. I think scripts are great, but scripts, especially in first-time directors, you know, it's hard to know what they're going to do. But you know, we all have spent years doing this, so sometimes it's just a feeling you get, and you go, okay, you know, but sometimes it's something else, you know. Like I said, short films to me are a really great way if you're a director, to tell people this is how I see, you know, what I'm saying. This is how I make that into a being.
So I think we have time for one question, right?
I was just going to say the one thing I think doesn't work, I don't know about you guys, is a cold email.
Yeah.
You know, I get 100 emails a day from writers and producers, and it just never ever gets out of the inbox, you know, so.
He doesn't even reply to my emails.
Well, also, we're not supposed to. You open yourself up to a lawsuit, so we don't even look at them.
Shelby, my name is Bruce Weiss. I met you years ago, God, probably close to 30 years ago, when I was making films with Hal Hartley.
Oh, hello.
How are you? So I'm still kicking around in the business.
Good.
That never gets any easier. You know, Jonathan Dana said to me at the very first Sundance Film Festival, being an independent film producer is a wonderful career as long as you don't have to make a living out of it. And, you know, it took me 20 years to sort of understand what he meant by that. And then yesterday, Sofia Coppola, after Fairyland, said, you know, it was her first independent film that she produced. Said it took her 8 years. Not a long time, necessarily. But, you know, she said, I thought I had connections. Right? So, I mean, I know what I think about this, but just wanted to get, you know, you guys' opinion.
think we've all.
I think we covered that.
We did. We all. It's not for the faint of heart.
Sure.
He's had his.
Thank you all for being on this panel. It's been really informative, and I really appreciate all of your contributions in the art space and everything that you've worked to create. My question was specifically related to technology. As you are seeing this kind of collapse happening, and then also the lack of reporting with the streaming services, what's happening kind of in the crypto space and with different types of reporting systems and things like that. Is the Guild for Producers looking at new technology that could help to hold the streaming services more accountable, both from the reporting systems for the actor side, for the writer side, for the producer side? And also I had a question, I'm gonna put 2 in there. The other question I have is there a way that you guys see collaboratively sharing more of those negotiation points that have been helpful, therefore, like your comment about the healthcare, and that might not be readily available to other producers. They may not know to lean into that that's something that's gone through. And specifically, like helping to also make it more profitable for producers in the negotiating up front of like tiered structures, like it hits this number of streaming, we get this bonus, it hits this level, we get this level of compensation from a merchandising perspective. Like, are there ways that you guys collaboratively as a organization bring your heads together and go, okay, hey, this is something that we could readily make available to other producers to know, to have more leverage?
Yes, I mean, we talk to each other all the time. We have Zooms, we go to dinner, we have drinks, we talk about this is how we make a living. It's also what part of the strikes have been about. So it needs to change. We all recognize it. We do share information with each other. But the Producers Guild is a 9,000 person organization. We don't talk to everybody. I mean, within our sort of siloed groups, we talk to each other. But hopefully this Bill of Rights will help to begin to articulate something that could make us feel like
again, with the streamers, we don't really have the leverage to crack open their data, but the Writers Guild settlement includes, for the very first time, an element of transparency around viewership, and part of it is because Netflix is shifting to an ad-supported model, and so they have to give data to the advertisers who are paying for viewership on their platform. So, that could be a wedge issue that then, leads to greater transparency. We'll certainly see what happens in the SAG strike and settlement, and obviously the biggest technology elephant in the room is AI, and that's something that there was some language codified now between the Writers Guild and the major studios, but I think it's going to need to be dealt with on a broader legislative basis because it touches on so many areas of copyright law and privacy, and you see authors are now suing the AI companies because AI, what is it? It's the greatest super parrot ever invented, right? But it's just parroting everybody's collective creations up to this point, So are those creators being exploited by without compensation? I mean, it's a huge, huge can of worms that will undoubtedly be litigated into the future.
So this gentleman's been waiting to ask a question.
It was almost kind of,
oh, okay.
It's based on technology. I'm just curious, I'm a huge tech head, with the LED walls and with After Effects and Unreal Engine, Blender, and all this stuff that brings the whole team smaller. I mean, since we were talking about monetary compensation, does that help your teams, making your team smaller because you're just dealing with?
It will. I think it will. I've been working on. I'm very excited about the opportunities that will eventually be available using Unreal and filming on a volume stage. It's still only affordable to Star Wars. I've been working with some tech companies to try to figure out how to sort of democratize that type of technology a little bit more, because while let's say the cost of the volume stage, so the volume stage it's sort of like this half moon stage where.
Volume stages are really, really expensive, but the actual technology to get the sensors and to be able to actually run the cameras with the sensors
is coming down, but still the cost of the virtual art department you need to build the world so that you can move around in it is really expensive. So, but it will come down, and I think then you have a really incredible tool.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.